On August 1, 2025, the Supreme Court delivered a historic rebuke to the executive branch, sending shockwaves through the corridors of power in Washington, D.C. The decision, announced in a packed courtroom and broadcast live across the nation, marked a turning point in the ongoing debate over the limits of presidential authority. In a 6-3 decision, the justices struck down a key Trump-era tariff plan that had been at the center of U.S. trade policy for years. The ruling immediately called into question the future of billions of dollars in tariffs that had been imposed on goods from China, Europe, and other major trading partners. This wasn't just a tweak to trade policy, it was a fundamental re-examination of presidential power. The court's majority opinion argued that the Constitution grants Congress, not the president, the authority to regulate international commerce, and that recent actions had blurred those lines beyond recognition. The case, U.S. Chamber of Commerce v. United States, challenged whether a president could unilaterally impose broad tariffs under the guise of national security without Congress's explicit consent. Business groups, economists, and lawmakers had watched the case closely, knowing its outcome could reshape the balance of power in Washington for decades. The court ruled decisively, the executive had overstepped, venturing into Congress's exclusive territory. The majority opinion cited historical precedents and warned that unchecked executive power could undermine the very foundations of American democracy. Some hailed this as a vital defense of the separation of powers. Lawmakers from both parties praised the decision as a necessary check on presidential overreach. Legal scholars described it as a reaffirmation of the Constitution's original intent, and commentators debated its implications late into the night. Others, however, saw it as a betrayal of the America First vision. Supporters of the former president argued that strong executive action was needed to protect American jobs and industries from unfair foreign competition, and that the court's decision would weaken the country's negotiating position on the world stage. Former President Trump condemned the decision in a fiery speech, galvanizing his base and framing it as another battle in a larger cultural war. He vowed to fight for what he called true American sovereignty, and his supporters quickly mobilized on social media, calling for legislative action to restore presidential trade powers. The ruling dismantles a key pillar of U.S. trade policy, leaving Congress and the current administration to navigate a new, uncertain landscape. Lawmakers now face the daunting task of crafting new trade laws that balance national security concerns with the need for open markets and global cooperation. The impact is immediate, affecting American families, multinational corporations, and global supply chains. Consumers may see changes in prices at the grocery store, while businesses must quickly adapt to a shifting regulatory environment. International partners are watching closely, uncertain how the U.S. will approach trade negotiations going forward. With the legal framework for those tariffs gone, a new chapter begins. Lawmakers, legal experts, and business leaders are already drafting proposals for a modernized approach to trade, one that reflects both the realities of a globalized economy and the constitutional limits on executive power. Will this usher in a new era of free trade, or spark a resurgence of economic nationalism? The debate is far from over. Some predict a return to bipartisan cooperation on trade, while others warn of renewed political battles as factions vie for influence over the nation's economic future. The answers will define U.S. policy for a generation. As the country stands at this crossroads, the choices made in the coming months will shape not only the economy, but the very nature of American democracy and its role in the world. The Supreme Court's decision hinged on the Constitution's Commerce Clause, which gives Congress, not the President, the power to regulate foreign trade. The majority opinion found that Trump's use of Section 232 of the Trade Expansion Act was an unconstitutional delegation of legislative authority. The court drew a line. National security tariffs must be targeted and justified, not sweeping and indefinite. Business groups argued the tariffs were economic, not security measures, and the court agreed, noting the widespread economic harm. The ruling sets a precedent. Major trade policies must go through Congress, restoring the separation of powers and forcing a return to legislative debate and accountability. Within minutes of the Supreme Court's decision, Donald Trump erupted in outrage, denouncing the ruling as a profound betrayal. He didn't hold back, directing his anger not only at the justices who opposed him, but even at those he himself had appointed to the bench. Trump's response was swift and fierce, painting the court's move as a personal affront and a direct attack on his presidency. He quickly reframed the decision, insisting it wasn't a matter of constitutional law, but a calculated political strike by out-of-touch elites determined to undermine his movement. Almost immediately, Trump's campaign machine sprang into action, organizing rallies across key battleground states and flooding social media with the hashtag #SCOTUSVSUSA. His supporters, energized by his defiance, echoed his outrage online and in the streets, turning the ruling into a rallying point for their cause. Trump's refusal to accept defeat transformed what could have been a legal setback into potent political fuel. His rhetoric deepened the already sharp divisions in the country, further eroding public trust in the judiciary. As the controversy grew, polls showed a noticeable decline in confidence in the Supreme Court, with many Americans now questioning the impartiality of the nation's highest legal authority. Seizing the moment, Trump called on his supporters to take action, urging them to flood Congress with calls, emails, and protests, demanding lawmakers restore his authority over tariffs. He dared members of Congress to stand against his movement, warning that any opposition would be seen as a betrayal by his loyal base. This aggressive strategy put Republican lawmakers in a difficult position. They now face a stark choice: support the Supreme Court's decision and risk incurring Trump's wrath, or side with him and face criticism for undermining judicial independence. The pressure is intense, with party unity and political futures hanging in the balance. The debate over tariffs and presidential power has exploded into one of the most volatile and central issues in American politics today. As the nation watches, the outcome will shape not only the future of trade policy, but also the balance of power between the branches of government and the very fabric of American democracy. The Supreme Court's ruling sent shockwaves across the country, instantly splitting the nation along deep and familiar partisan lines. The decision became a flashpoint, igniting passionate responses from both sides of the political spectrum and drawing crowds to the steps of the court, where protesters and supporters faced off, their voices echoing the country's divisions. Democratic leaders quickly stepped forward, praising the verdict as a crucial victory for the rule of law and a much-needed check on what they saw as unchecked executive overreach. They hailed the decision as a turning point, promising to work toward crafting a new, bipartisan framework for trade that would restore balance and predictability to U.S. economic policy. For many Democrats, the ruling was not just a legal win, but a moral one, reinforcing their belief in the power of institutions to hold leaders accountable. For them, it was a long-awaited vindication against Trump's aggressive trade tactics, which they argued had hurt American consumers and strained international alliances. Celebrations erupted among party officials and activists, who saw the verdict as a chance to reset America's global economic relationships. On the other side, Republicans found themselves deeply fractured. Trump loyalists condemned the court's decision, calling it a politically motivated attack and vowing to push for measures that would limit the judiciary's power in the future. Their anger was palpable, fueling rallies and fiery speeches that warned of judicial overreach and the erosion of presidential authority. Yet not all conservatives were united in outrage. Pro-business Republicans and industry leaders, weary of the uncertainty and disruption caused by tariffs, quietly welcomed the end of what they saw as damaging trade wars. Behind closed doors, they discussed new opportunities for growth and stability, hoping the verdict would bring a return to more predictable economic policy. With the court's decision, Congress now holds the reins of trade policy, but the path forward is anything but clear. Deep ideological divisions and competing interests make consensus difficult, and the challenge of forging a unified approach looms large over the legislative chambers. The fallout from the ruling extends far beyond Washington, reaching into state politics as well. Manufacturing states, worried about job losses and economic uncertainty, are urgently seeking new protections and support for their industries, lobbying both state and federal lawmakers for action. Meanwhile, agricultural states are celebrating the prospect of reopening export markets that had been closed off by tariffs. Farmers and trade representatives see new hope for expanding their reach abroad, eager to rebuild relationships with international buyers and boost rural economies. The center of the debate has shifted decisively from the White House to Congress and state houses across the nation. Lawmakers at every level are now grappling with the complex task of shaping America's trade future, each bringing their own priorities and pressures to the table. As the dust settles, one thing is clear: the aftershocks of this verdict will reverberate for years to come, shaping not only the nation's economic policies, but also its political landscape, as leaders and citizens alike wrestle with the consequences of a nation divided. The Supreme Court's decision sent ripples worldwide. U.S. allies in Europe, Canada, and Mexico welcomed the ruling, hoping for more stable trade relations. Yet skepticism remains. Protectionist sentiment in America is far from gone, and Congress could still enact new barriers. Japan and others watch to see if Congress can support free trade. In China, officials noted the shift from executive to legislative power, preparing to engage a more complex U.S. political landscape. Global markets rallied and supply chains saw relief. The world is watching. Will the U.S. embrace global integration or turn inward again? Economic studies showed the tariffs cost U.S. consumers and businesses over $1.4 billion per month, raising prices on everyday goods. While some steel and aluminum producers benefited briefly, most industries faced higher costs, job losses, and reduced investment. Agriculture suffered most, hit by retaliatory tariffs and plummeting exports, leading to farm bankruptcies and federal bailouts. Globally, companies shifted supply chains to avoid tariffs, often moving production to other low-cost countries, not back to the U.S. The Supreme Court's decision now raises a new question. Will these costly, inefficient supply chains persist or revert to their old patterns? The ruling marks a major shift in the balance of power. For decades, Congress delegated trade authority to the president for speed and flexibility. The court's decision reverses this, reasserting Congress's constitutional role. Now, major trade measures require congressional approval, demanding debate and consensus. This restores transparency but risks gridlock in a polarized era. The executive must now partner with Congress, and lawmakers must take ownership of trade policy. The era of unilateral executive action is over. Trade policy will be forged, slowly in Congress. The business community greeted the ruling with relief and anxiety. Wall Street and multinationals welcomed the end of unpredictable tariffs, seeing a return to stability and lower costs. Small businesses reliant on imports also cheered, hoping for better margins, but protected industries like steel and aluminum fear renewed foreign competition and job losses. They'll lobby Congress for new protections. Across the board, businesses crave clarity. Uncertainty is the enemy. They urge Congress to act quickly, establishing clear rules so they can plan, invest, and grow. The Supreme Court's decision has fundamentally altered U.S. economic policy, reasserting Congress's authority and ending an era of executive-driven trade wars. The fallout is intense. Partisan divides deepen and businesses brace for transition. The world watches as the U.S. debates its economic identity: global free trade leader or fortress of protectionism. The answer now lies with Congress. The path chosen will shape not just American prosperity, but the stability of the global economy. The nation stands at a crossroads, its next steps uncertain but momentous.